a while, come back, leave for a while, come back. So Sarah and I wanted to sit down and really talk about what we did and the painful process for both of us on how she got to be here. And before I start, I just want to say what happened with us is not unique in any way. It's the same that for anyone with addiction problems, you'll hear the same kinds of stories. But for Sarah and I, we were always really close, and I was afraid this was going to just destroy our relationship altogether. And I'm so glad it didn't. So do you want to kind of start and talk about where you started off and what was kind of happening when you started drinking?
Sure. I drank casually through high school. And then when I turned 17, I had an incident with an ex-boyfriend where I turned to alcohol from a feeling of loneliness, and I felt that's where I started to become dependent on it. And once I realized it made me feel better, I used that in most situations, and it wasn't that bad right away. From 17, and I'm 29 now, and I've been sober since February 4th, 2022, and it's not my first time getting sober, but yeah.
So when Sarah was living with her boyfriend at the time, I saw some signs of drinking, but it was normal high school drinking. You know, you go out, you party, you come home. She was a homebody. She was home every night. But when she started dating this man, I started to notice some different behaviors. I noticed some behaviors from him I didn't really like. And then the turning point was really on Easter Sunday. I went to get Sarah. She was not answering her phone. She had not answered a call in days. And for anyone who was a child, just a pit hit my stomach. And on Easter Sunday, I just said, that's it. I'm going over to his house. And I went over to his house, and Sarah opened the door with this shiner. And I'll tell you, for the people that know me, I wanted to go into that house and just kill that kid. And there are some lessons I have learned since I had Sarah, but before I had her when I was pregnant. And there's this woman, my closest friend's mother, who's here today. I'm so glad because she's a big part of this story, and she doesn't even know it. So she said to me when I was pregnant with Sarah, once you have her, it's going to be the first time you could actually kill somebody. And I thought, well, I have wanted to kill people in the past. It's been pretty close. I thought I could kill someone. Yep, but it really was true. It was a feeling that came over me like no other feeling I had ever felt. I was sick. And what made it worse is Sarah didn't come home with me. She made a choice to stay. And that's at that moment when I drove away, I knew alcohol had her. Not the boyfriend, not the being out of the house, the alcohol had her. Because she had other stuff going on too. She was estranged from her father. I mean, there were other stuff. I was a single mom. We were struggling. So when you didn't come home, that's when I started to think about, okay, what's my plan of action here? And what do I have to do to help her? And shortly after this is when Sarah started calling for help. But she only called when she was drunk. I did not get a call sober for a little while. And so I had to really learn to know that voice. Because I couldn't see her, because if I saw her, I could tell. I knew when she was crying. I knew when she was drinking. I knew when she was hungry. You just know. So now I had to be able to tell on the phone what was going on. And that was probably one of the hardest things, because she was so calm. Hi, Mom. Just wondering, if I could have a few dollars. And at that point, when I said no, it was like a switch. And that was when things just entered into a whole nother phase because she wanted what she wanted when she wanted it, right? You weren't working.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about after Andrew and kind of where that went from there, if you want.
Yeah, sure. Well, eventually left that relationship, but while leaving that, I did initially turn to alcohol. Even though I was under 21, I got a hold of it and it made me feel better. But then I started working at a sports bar, and I worked there for about 2 years, from like 19 to 21. And there is when I was working in the back with the kitchen, and so drinking was pretty common there. The head chef had given me someone's ID that they left behind when I was 19, and then I started going out drinking with them, met somebody who was already in full-blown alcohol addiction, started a relationship with them, wasn't thinking straight throughout all of that. I got suspended from work for a week, so I didn't really have consequences to my actions yet. And yeah, so it basically, once I started that relationship with someone already in alcohol addiction, that's who I was drawn to. It was easier for me because I wanted what made me feel better, and then I didn't, that's when selfishness pretty much took over, and tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And
So when Sarah was working at the platform, this is, we all know where we were when 9/11 hit, right? We all know certain events in our lives. We know where we were. We know what we were doing. And this night, I was watching Barney Miller with Joe. I don't know if anyone knows that show except me and Mrs. Kelly, maybe Angela. Does anybody know Barney Miller? It's an old show. I'm watching it and I get a call and I can't even understand her. She's just sobbing hysterically. And in between the sobbing, she's saying assaulted. And I'm thinking, what? Finally figure out that the chefs in the kitchen had assaulted her. And it had been going on for some time. So again, I got in the car against Joe's wishes. And I might have put a baseball bat in the car. I'm not sure. But it was this blind rage. And I went down to the restaurant, and the girl was sitting at the front. Sarah was outside. I hadn't found her yet. And she explained to me, don't worry about it. Everything's okay. We took care of it. Sarah is going to work at the front of the house and not go in the kitchen. And I went, you're kidding me, right? And right at that moment, I saw one of the chefs come out. Then I got up and I said a couple things to him. Then she at that point, wanted to call the police. But all I saw, she had tunnel vision, I had tunnel vision. Whoever's going to hurt Sarah, I'm going to hurt them. Not even really addressing the alcohol part of this yet. So I left there and explained to them that we would be filing charges, and we kind of did all that. But Sarah came home and she moved back home.
yeah, I had been living with the active alcoholic while I worked there for about 2 years, drinking daily before work, all day drinker.
Yeah.
So it had where I needed the alcohol at that point. So it pretty much had me at the grasp right there.
Yep. So I had to decide at this point, should I let her come back and live in the house? And I said, talk to Joe about it. And I said, I'm going to do it, but there's going to be some stipulations. They're going to have rules. Well, she didn't want any part of that. She had been living on her own.
Yeah, before that, throughout a couple apartments, there were several instances of when I drank, calling people that's welfare checks,
Yep.
a couple evictions. So it was already hard for you to let me move back.
Yeah. She was struggling. living in one place because the drinking, she wasn't working steady. And I was very nervous about it. So I had to really plan ahead. Another visit to Mrs. Kelly. I go see her. I'm in Westfield, so I go by her house. And we were talking, and I was telling her what was going on with Sarah. And she looked at me and she said, Danielle, here's the thing. This is going to be a difficult process. And I just remember thinking, no shit, this is a difficult process now. What do you mean? It's going to get worse? She goes, it's going to get bad, but you can do it. You can do it. Just listen. And I said, okay, I'm going to go and just listen. And I tried. But it got to the point where Sarah was just doing whatever she wanted. She was coming home drunk and she was just combative. She wanted to fight, just fight, fight, fight. She had a lot of anger inside of her from these relationships, and I was the punching bag. But I got it. I understood it. I had Joe with me, and he was trying to explain this to me as well. But she would also, in the interim of being in and out of the house, I would get a call from the police saying, we have Sarah here. The first call I ever got from the police was shortly after she moved in. And when I saw that unknown number, I just knew. And Sarah hadn't been in trouble with the police at this time. So I could hear her sobbing in the back. And the officer let me talk to her. And she was begging me to please come get her. I could tell she was like almost ready to throw up, sobbing. And I took the phone, I put the phone down, and I just remember sitting and thinking, what is the wrong thing to do? And I knew what that was. So then I just did the opposite. I told the officer, thank you for calling. I'm not coming. And he said, thank you, because most mothers would be right down here getting their kid. I went, nope. Then this whole journey starts. Now we're in a whole nother phase of the drinking, because I don't really know how much she is drinking. I know she's drinking a lot, but I don't know at this point that she's drinking first thing in the morning. And I'm also denying any knowledge I have of this disease and thinking, well, Sarah's got to be different. My brother's a recovering alcoholic and addict. He's been sober for 29 years. I started to relate her to him, which wasn't good. It was different. But once the police called me, then I knew we were kind of in for a ride. And then she met this man. I mean, there was a lot of fighting and arguing and stealing, and actually no stealing. Sarah never took any money. She never took anything from me. Nothing. And so that's why associating her with my brother's story was different, because my brother did. And Sarah just wasn't doing that, wasn't showing those behaviors. But then she met this young man. He came to the house, and another day I will never forget. He had this big fur coat on, and he came in, and he smelled like marijuana. And I just went, here we go again. Because Sarah didn't feel good about herself. So that you can't attract goodness if you don't feel good inside. And she moved in with him. You want to talk about that time?
Yeah, I could talk about that time. There was an instance I can bring up before I moved out, when I was living at home.
Yeah.
Where I don't think you knew how much I was drinking, but that first time you tried to section me.
Yeah.
That happened before. So I moved in with Shamel.
Okay.
And so
that's right.
That's a pretty significant part, because was living at home, and I was in my room, and it was early in the morning, and I took like 3 shots. You called me out to the living room, and there were 3 officers there, and I didn't know what a Section 35 was, but where they take you and you're going to go to the courthouse in handcuffs, and then you see a judge and they determine if you're going to go to a treatment facility. So they took me, and I told them in the cell that I didn't drink, way less than what I was drinking. And I went in front of the judge, and they let me go that day. And I was already and I had drinks in me.
Yeah,
So that was like,
I think
no,
we
I
should
don't
talk
have
a little
I
bit
don't
about
have a
that.
problem.
Yeah,
Because that was, and then I walked home. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was.
so sometimes we forget when you go through a
There's a lot.
traumatic experience, you forget these details, and they're just huge. They're huge. Because a whole nother section of this is the courts, the court system, how we help addicts and alcoholics, how we help the mentally ill, how the court system, the police department. I knew what a section meant. Section 35 means and there's tricky things about this. I know this law, I know this process like the back of my hand now. In order to section someone, first you go to the court, you have to petition it. So you speak to a clerk, and you have to write page after page of everything that's gone on. Then you hand that back. Then they hand it to an officer. They have to serve her with the papers. But first they have to find her. And if they don't find her by 3:00, that shift's over. I have to go back at 3:30 and do the whole thing all over again. I have to fill out the paperwork, hand it to the clerk. It's the same system. When this was done a year later, I went back to the clerk and I got her some flowers because she was so helpful and so calm with me because I was sobbing. And she's like, okay, just fill this out. Fill this out. I'm like sobbing. And of course, the officers could not find her. So they would call me and say, you got to come back. So then I started looking for her. And someone had told me she was and this is cold weather now. We're getting into winter weather. And I went down to this tent community in Northampton. And I parked my car, and as I'm walking down, I can see these women coming out of the wooded area. And I thought, oh my God. It's just like a stab in your gut because you know your kid's in there. And I asked around, and these girls were so nice. And I really wanted to take all of them home with me. I was like, do you want to just come home with me? I'll get you some help. But she knew I was trying to section her, so she was not going to make it easy for me. So these women told me, there's her tent over there. I went, oh.
I didn't know this was happening at the time.
Yeah.
I was on the run.
She was running. She did not want to, because she didn't know what was going to happen when she got sectioned. So what happens is there's only one facility in this state for women. And that's in New Bedford. What's the name of it?
Women's Addiction Treatment Center.
WATC. So WATC is run by recovering alcoholics and addicts. You only had to be sober at that time. How long?
6 months.
6 months to work at this facility. You can only stay there 30 days. When Sarah went to court, I thought, okay, now she's going to be sectioned. She'll go to court. I'm listening to the judge, and he looks at Sarah and he says, Sarah, you're too pretty to be getting into trouble like this. I went, are you kidding me? Well, this guy next to me who had a son up there goes, I hope he talks to my son like that. I went, no, you don't. So he let her go. And as she's walking by me, and I mean, we can talk about this now, but boy, it was hard when she'd said it. She walked by me and just mouthed, I hope you die. And I went, okay, talk to you later, Sarah. Good luck today. I don't know where you're going. I had to I did not want to cry, didn't want to get upset. And then I looked at that judge and went, we're not done, buddy. We are not done, you and me. So I did write a letter to the paper. I did speak to him personally. And he not only did it once, but he did it twice more. He let her go.
3 times?
And that 3 times he let her go. And the 4th time, finally, they took her.
And then 2 more times after that.
and then 2 more times after that. So when she went to WotC, this facility in New Bedford looks like a prison. It's, barbed wires. It does not look like a facility that gives any type of treatment. And there was a woman outside swearing like no tomorrow on the phone. And I said, they let you come out and have cigarettes? She goes, what are you talking about? I work here. I went, oh, that's nice. That's nice. Do you know Sarah, my daughter? Are you her counselor? I just thought, how is this? But this is our system. We want people to get help, but we don't give them a pathway to get it. We don't give them the right pathway. Because when I went to get Sarah after the 30 days, the first time, I pulled in there and she said, do you really want to know what it's like in there? I said, well, if you want to tell me. She said, well, have you seen Orange is the New Black? Because that's pretty much it. Women are setting off alarms. Women are, right?
Yeah, it was, yeah. I mean, it was, people would run away from there and then OD the next day. We would hear about it because it's not in a good part, so.
Yeah.
But for there, you have to have somewhere to go home after. And the first time you let me come home after.
Yep. I let her come home and I really talked it out with Joe. And I also talked about it with my dad. And my dad really struggled with my brother's addiction and really enabled him. He would come home and say he needed things and they'd give him money. And I wanted him to know what was going on with Sarah. I wanted him to really understand that when I had to tell him she's homeless, why? Because my brother was never homeless, never kicked out of the house.
And that was 100% choice by me.
Yeah.
To be homeless.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to drink.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yep. And so now we're in this phase where Sarah's getting sectioned and she's drinking and she's falling apart. And I was falling apart too, because it was the phone calls. It's like chipping away at sanity. You're just chipping away. And she would call me when she was drunk and demand that I give her help. And then when I wouldn't give her the help she wanted, because I would tell her, if you want something to eat, go down to Antonio's. I'll get you something to eat. I'm not giving you any money. I'm not doing it. And once Sarah heard that, this violence in her, she just went right to the heart of my emotions, because she was struggling, I was struggling. And I think at that time, did you think you could wear me down? Like, did you think I would give in?
I don't really know at that point. I don't think I was trying to wear you down specifically. I couldn't stop the pattern I was on.
So then what happened is, now a year, 2 years is going by and we're still going through this. And then another incident, I'm walking with my coworkers. I'm walking with my coworkers in Amherst after work one day. One of them was my boss. And we were in Amherst and we cut across the street to go to Johnny's, and I could hear Sarah on the street. I could hear her yelling. And I just went, oh, Jesus, this is not going to be good. And I could see her, my peripheral vision. And I just thought, I just got to get in the restaurant. Well, then I hear, Danielle.
This is something I don't remember at all.
And my coworkers looked at me. I went, I feel bad for her mother. I don't know who that is, but this isn't going to be good. And my coworker goes, Danielle, she just said your name. I went, oh, she did? And then we walked into the restaurant and I completely ignored it. We sat in front of the window and here comes Sarah right in front of the window. She goes, I see you. And then I looked at my friends. I went, okay, that is my daughter. That's Sarah. Just let's eat and ignore it, because the police are coming. Someone had already called the police. And my coworkers, I just sat there eating. I was just eating. My coworkers were looking at me like, Danielle, what are you doing? I said, there's nothing I can do right now. She's in a bad place. She does not want me to come out and talk to her. I have to leave her alone. And they said, she's going to get arrested. I said, I know. That's what has to happen. He go, Danielle, where is she going to go? I said, I don't know. And that is the hardest thing to have to say when you don't know what's going to happen to your child. I don't know. I don't know where she's going to sleep tonight. I don't know if someone is going to try to hurt her. I don't know if she's going to try to kill herself. I don't know if she's going to hurt someone else. The worst fear is death. The worst fear I had every single night I went to bed was that Sarah was going to hurt herself and die alone. And then this one night, I get another call from the police going, so your daughter's in a hotel room in Northampton. You need to come get her. We're going to Section 12 her. So Section 12 is when the police do it. So we go to this hotel room. She did not want to leave. She gets on the stretcher, and as they're wheeling her out, she yells to the clerk, am I welcome back here? They were like, no, you're not. I go, yeah, don't worry, she's not coming back here. But Sarah, because she's female and pretty, she got a lot of people to help her. So I would get calls like this. I got a call from an Uber driver. She goes, do you know where your daughter is right now? I said, who is this? She goes, I'm an Uber driver, and I just brought your daughter to the Marriott. Do you remember that?
I don't remember her calling you.
What, she got you the room?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
She goes, I
There
got
was a
her a room at the
snowstorm.
Marriott. I went, what? You got her a room at the Marriott? She goes, what kind of mother are you? I went, did you give her your number? Because if you didn't, I am. I'm going to give her your number. She can call you next time she needs help. And this woman called me every name in the book. I went, I hope you never have an addict in your life. Never. So Sarah had all these allowances given to her. I'm like, she's never going to get sober if people keep just helping her. So after that is when I started to see a change in Sarah. She was just getting tired. I could see it in her face. She had Joe to talk to. Joe's in recovery too. So they had this camaraderie where they could talk to each other about what was happening. And Sarah didn't have to say much. He just understood her. Because really, and Sarah's kind of like that just naturally. When she gets flustered, she doesn't like to talk too much. She's like, it's too much. So Joe really knew that about her. So their relationship got stronger and stronger and stronger. I also didn't know during this time that Andrew, my son, was paying for her to get rides everywhere. He was paying for Ubers. So I called him up and I said, what's going on, buddy? You've been helping your sister out. He goes, I can't do much, Mom. I'm up here, at school. I can't really do anything, but I can make sure she gets home safe or gets to wherever she's going safe. And I thought, okay, I can't tell him how to interact with her. I can't tell him not to give her help, not to give her money. I can't do that. Even if Joe said, hey, I'm going to give Sarah $100. Okay. I can't be in control of that. I could only be in control of what I was doing and saying. And the worry started to change. I stopped thinking of the sectioning. I stopped that because Sarah then had a fear, right? That I was
Yeah,
every
and-
time, why don't you talk about that? Because that's important.
Also, the sectioning, the first section happened Christmas time. 6 months later, I get sectioned again. So first time didn't really work. The second time I got out of the section and I went to pick up my purse at the police station, and I opened my purse and all of my full nips were still in there from when I got arrested, and I relapsed before I got home. So, and then the third section, so by that time, I don't know if that was working, but I was tired.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the
And just,
section's good to get sober in the moment and keep you sober for 30 days, but they don't really prepare you too much for when you get out.
and the last time she was sectioned, they had called me and said, we're releasing her, we're discharging her. I said, she can't come home. They said, well, where is she gonna go? I said, that's not my problem. She cannot come home. And they dropped her off at my house without me there. And I could not believe it. And I'll tell you, I don't mess around with the people down below. I went right to the mayor, the governor. And I wrote letters. I wrote letters to WotC. I'm a letter writer. I am a letter writer. And I was livid because here's Sarah. I got the house to myself now. I wasn't home, I was at work. So I started noticing she looked different. She was dressing different. She just looked tired and weepy all the time. And I knew that look meant we're turning a corner. I just have to keep up what I'm doing. I cannot give her money. I cannot even think when I look at her and she looks so put together and she's talking to me calmly and saying, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm working. This is where I'm working. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to get a car. It is very easy to be tricked into thinking she's okay. Here's some money. I couldn't do it. I couldn't let her use my car, nothing. And I think at that time, Joe and I were looking at moving, and I thought, what are we going to do when we move to Springfield? Is she going to come with us? Is she going to stay with this boyfriend? What is going to happen? And things with him were getting very violent and aggressive. And there were a couple incidents between me and him. And the police said, listen, Danielle, if you come to this apartment again with maybe a baseball bat, you will be arrested. And I looked at the officer and I said, do you have a daughter? He goes, yes. And I know exactly how you feel. I go, then you won't arrest me. And he just looked at me and said, Danielle, it's not going to help Sarah. Not to arrest him. It's not going to. I go, well, can you arrest her then? At least when Sarah was in a jail cell or at WotC, I slept. Only time I slept. And I mean, like, I was out like a light. But if she was out running around, I was up all night. I had people looking for her.
And a lot of times that made me drink the next day, what made me start that was the guilt of those phone calls
Yeah,
and the guilt of everything I did the day before. And then that's what it was also.
yeah. And then Joe and I moved, and Sarah came with us. And I said, I'm going to allow this, but there are some things now that have to change. And I gave her a list of conditions, and she did every single one of them. She went and got a counselor because alcoholism and addiction, AA was not something at the time she wanted to do, but AA and therapy in combination, that is what is the most successful. And Sarah had found a therapist. She was using an amazing organization in Springfield, out of the sheriff's department, and she started talking to people. That was the thing. She started talking to a counselor, talking to sober people.
And that was after my last arrest, which was that week of February 2022, when I just did not want to get arrested again.
Yeah,
That was like the amount of times you can get arrested and not spend time in jail. I was hitting that point. So I
yeah.
was ready. Yeah.
And we had an incident where when we first moved into the apartment, I knew it was going to be hard for her, but I told her she can't keep her door closed. And there's what happens is if you know anyone who's an addict, they have personal items that are like a trigger. They become a trigger. And for me, it was her pocketbook. She could stuff so many nips in that pocketbook. It was amazing. I was like, what the heck? This little tiny pocketbook. I cannot even look at she does not bring a pocketbook in the house anymore. I have to ask her, please do not bring it in. It's an instant trigger for me. People have these and sometimes you don't realize it. So what I realized was when she would come over, I would get instantly agitated. And then I started looking at the pocketbook hanging up. And I realized it wasn't her irritating me, it was that pocketbook. It represented something I wanted nothing to do with. I didn't want to look at it, nothing. So she stopped doing that. She stopped bringing it in. But we had an incident where it was when we first moved in.
I had
And,
just been living back,
Yep.
for
and she had been drinking. And I said, sorry, there's no 3 strikes here. I called the police. And Sarah was more mad. She was so angry with me. And then I realized the police were not the people to call because they came and they're talking to her. And then I see them drive away. But as they're driving away, Sarah is driving past them in her car. So she got into her car, drove around them. I ran out and stopped them and said, she is drinking and driving right now. Now you can arrest her. No, we can't, ma'am.
they did let me go that day.
I said, what?
Yeah.
He said, we can't arrest her because we don't know if she's drunk. I went, this is where we're at with the police. This is it right here. This situation, she's drunk driving. Well, ma'am, that's you telling us. I go, so you're going to wait till she either kills herself or kills someone else? And then they got aggravated with me and they left and she was gone. You came back that night. And after she came back that night, that was the end. You did not, when you were, once that happened and you came back and we sat down and we all talked about this, I looked at Sarah's face and I just knew she had had it. I had seen that face before with people. I recognized it and I just thought, finally we're getting to this point. And it's okay if it's not perfect, but we're turning a corner here.
And for me, the first step we had to make was me go to a detox for 2 weeks. Not a good one, but it was a detox for 2 weeks, which I did. And then
Yes,
that's
right.
You found me one. We went to court and I was on probation also for probably 10 years of this back and forth.
Yeah.
So until May of this past year. So that also, I wasn't mad to be on probation, but that was the agreement.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to drink, but to live in the house, yeah.
Yeah. So that day, I took her to court. And this is God's way of saying, okay, Danielle, I'm about to intervene in a whole nother way in your life. So we get to court. And I walk in and I hear this woman in front of the judge sobbing about her son. And she turns, and her son was a client of mine at one time. She was trying to get him sectioned again. And she's sobbing. So we left the courtroom and she came out and I introduced her to Sarah. Do you remember what she said to you?
Maybe not.
Yeah,
Exactly.
she was crying and she said, Sarah, don't do this to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do this to your mother. Don't do this to the people you love. And they always say, you don't want to get sober for other people. Okay, why not? Why not? Why can't we change that saying? Because I think it kind of stinks. And Sarah gave her a hug, went in front of the judge, came out. She was already done. And she said, I'm ready to go. And I brought her to Worcester, to the shittiest looking. I mean, this place looked
Mice were crawling over me in my sleep.
horrific. There was people sleeping in the One man urinated on himself in the hallway, and I'm sitting there thinking, can I leave my daughter here? Yes, I can. It wasn't that hard, actually. I realized it really wasn't that hard. You get to a point where you're just like, I don't care if I drop her off in the middle of the desert. Something has to change. So she went, and you know, Sarah is one of those people that makes the best out of a situation. She really does. And you left there with some funny stories. She was on probation, it seemed like her whole life. But if any of you know anything about probation officers, they don't usually give gift cards and gifts and parties. They love Sarah because she never missed a urine test. She would get called. You got to go now. So it didn't matter what she was doing. She had to explain to her boss, and everyone has to do this. If you have been arrested and you have to do random drug testing, they call you, you tell them the color, they tell you the color, right?
Mhm.
If you have that color, it does not matter. You could be having lunch with the Pope and you have to say, I have to go take a urine test, excuse me. Doesn't matter, they don't care. So people lose their jobs. Sarah got lucky. She had employers that were very good to her, and they listened to her and they trusted her because she was a hard worker. But she never, in all those years, missed going down there one time. Her probation officer called me at the end and said, we're really going to miss Sarah. And I said, are you? Yes, I'm sure you will. You'll never see her again, hopefully.
No.
So I hope you had a touching goodbye the last time she was in there. But in doing this, is there anything you'd like to impart? Anything you learned, anything that you could tell a parent?
Don't give up on your kid.
Don't give up on your kid.
It is a battle with yourself, and it gets easier every day, and then it gets fun to do better, and
Yeah,
there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
there is.
And
There is. And I knew it was there because I had people in my life like Connie Kelly who I could just go over and visit with, who would make me feel better in 3 minutes. She raised about 15 kids of her own. I don't even know how many kids, grandkids. She was the word of wisdom for me. She didn't say much, but Connie, I can't even tell you how grateful I am for the help you gave me. And everybody needs somebody like that. I had Joe with me. He was in my corner. You have a loved one that's abusing drugs, abusing alcohol. It's not them. It's just not them. So I knew when I was saying no to Sarah and she was cursing me and telling me she was going to kill me in my sleep, and maybe not that. I think that was a kid from Tri-County. All of these things that Sarah said to me, I was able to disassociate. And we all disassociate. We think of disassociation as, that's not how it is. We just have to disassociate all the time. I had to remove myself as her mother and treat her as if she was a stranger I was trying to help. Because if a parent does not have the capability of doing that, you won't be able to sit here. We wouldn't be able to sit here and do this. I would be giving, it would be dysfunctional, and it would just continue and continue and continue. Now Sarah has these skills, or she has recognized, I need to live with healthy people. Ed, I need to have a good job. Yankee Mattress. She's a hard worker. We had to rebuild our relationship, but it didn't take much because most of the negative feelings she had towards me were when she was drinking, not when she was sober. So I had to really say that to myself every single day on my way to work, because I knew I was going to get calls at work. I'd have to say, today is going to be okay. I'm going to support Sarah by not supporting her. I'm going to support Sarah by letting her know I love her. And I told her the same thing every time. I will pick you up at any time of the day or night and bring you to detox.
Yeah, I hated that sentence.
I know. She hated it. And I'll tell you, she. You did hate it.
Yeah.
As soon as I would say, Sarah, if you ever click, nothing, she would tell me, Mom, I'm not going to detox. Okay, but if you do, click. I mean, she did not want to hear it. But that's the wonderful thing about addiction. If you want to change, you can do it. It didn't matter what I did. She didn't get sober because of what things I did. What I did or didn't do just helped facilitate it, I think, a little quicker.
Mhm.
That's what that did. But Sarah did this on her own. She made the decision one day, I'm done. Do you remember that day? I mean, you may not. I don't know.
Well, technically, the court did determine that day, but I was on board with it at the same time.
Yeah.
I didn't want to drink anymore at that point. Yeah, I didn't want to. And I was just using it as a void for loneliness. And I love being alone now. So
Yeah. So I guess if there's anything we would want someone to take from this is that family is hard. We love our family. The person you feel safest with is often the one that is the target for all those emotions you don't feel safe releasing on other people. And that sometimes the help you give an addict or an alcoholic or anyone struggling, sometimes the best help you can give them is just to listen and then send them on their way. Because nobody is going to get sober. She was never going to get sober because I told her to. That was never going to happen. And no addict, alcoholic, gambler, doesn't matter what you're addicted to. You have to be ready for it. You have to be ready in your heart, in your mind. And when I saw this look on Sarah, I could see it coming. So I had to be patient. I couldn't always say to her, Sarah, how are you feeling today? Because she hated that too.
yeah, I did.
Yeah, she didn't
I
like
just
that.
had a flashback.
So I just treated her like she was kind of a guest.
Yeah.
I treated her very casually. And that worked. Now, if Joe wasn't there, would I have been able to do it? I don't know. Doesn't matter. He was there. I don't need to think about what I would have done. I was very blessed to have Joe around. And I'm just blessed that we're here today to talk about this. And I really hope there are some people watching this that are clinicians. And I hope that they too can realize when you're helping a family through this, you have to be really careful what you say, because it's a very painful process. And you can't say to someone, just stop drinking, just stop drinking. I tried everything. I tried changing her room around. I thought maybe if I cleaned out her closet for her, she'd come home and be happy. All these things that I thought if I just fixed, but it was in her heart she needed to fix first. She needed to learn to like herself. If you don't like yourself, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. So having Sarah in my life is just, I just don't even know what to say. I'm just blessed. I'm blessed that we're here talking about it, and hopefully someone hears something that resonates, and some mother or father out there can hear it and say, okay, there is a light at the end of this tunnel. It's not always the light you're looking for, though. People lose their life all the time to this disease. So that's a light in a different sense. A light, not always a lightness of positivity. This disease kills so many people every single day. So you have to look at light in a very, very different way when you've lost someone to this disease. And we all know someone that has died from drugs or alcohol. So Thanks for coming. This is wonderful. This was really nice. I appreciate it. If anybody wants to ask Sarah any questions or me, you're more than welcome. There's coffee up here. I do want to say thank you to this young man behind the camera. I forgot your name, I'm sorry. That's Cable Access, so it's wonderful. They're here. God only knows who's watching this thing tonight. But yeah, does anybody want to ask anything or just wrap it up?
How would you avoid your triggers around alcohol?
You know, I stopped hanging out with anybody. There was a point where I was sober for 2.5 years, and then I was hanging out with people who were drinking all around me. And then one day I just drank with them. So I just stopped hanging out with people. I went to work. I came home every day. Honestly, just having you as someone there every day was helpful. And now I avoid triggers. I still find new triggers every day. Me and my mom went to a casino when we were in Florida,
Yes.
and I didn't realize how much of a trigger that was walking in there, just from the homeless days, the environment, just. So I'm still learning triggers, but I know to just walk away from them now. What we did was just identify it, then we left. And I mean, it still will pop into my head, even just like a shower thought of, why don't you have a drink? But then it's only a split second. But it's like, that's reality comes into play. So
Yeah.
triggers still happen, but just learning what to do every day, making those changes.
Yeah. Her car, Sarah lived in her car for a while. So the car was a trigger for me because, and this is another thing to really remember about people that have lived in their car, homeless, addicts, whatever, is that car becomes very sacred, becomes a place that they consider that's where they're living. So Sarah was very protective of her car. And it has a whole new meaning for someone else. So if I went near the car, if I looked in the car, Sarah would get very angry. And so now seeing the car clean, for the most part, just not all her stuff all in it. I mean, you could tell she was living in it. That was a trigger for me. But then Sarah started to clean it up. Now she keeps her car clean for the most part. And yeah, I think me also recognizing that was a trigger, because we were walking through the casino and Sarah was just getting so snappy with me. And I'm thinking, woohoo, I got a night of gambling tonight. Yeah, lasted 10 minutes. I looked at her and I said, are you okay? She went, we got to go. And then I realized this whole scene is a trigger for her. So we left. Yeah. People drinking, you got people at the slot machines with a cigarette hanging out of their mouth. They're like drinking. I mean, it's once I saw it through a different perspective, I was like, oh my gosh, I'll go by myself next time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's it. So thank you.
Thank you, congratulations. Yeah, both of you.
Okay. Where's the thing? That's a wrap.
That takes a lot of courage to share that
Thank you.
story, a lot of bravery.
Good job,
Takes a
Mom.
lot of courage.
Thank you. Okay.